Hi there, it's Kristen from k.becca, and today I'm going to be making a card using a stamp set that I designed for the latest release from Pretty Pink Posh. This set is called Giving Thanks, which is a fall and Thanksgiving themed stamp set and includes these two little groundhogs dressed up as pilgrims, plus a bunch of different leaves, pumpkins, a little acorn, and the sentiments Giving Thanks, Happy Fall, and Happy Thanksgiving. For this card, I'm going to be using the 3 larger leaves and the Happy Thanksgiving stamps from the set. I wanted this card to have some texture and a softer look, so I'm using the Strathmore cold press watercolor paper, and I really like these 5.5 inch by 8.5 inch pads of it because if you cut it in half lengthwise, you get 2 perfect A2 size pieces. This paper has one side that's more textured and one that's a bit smoother, and I'll be using the more textured side for this project. I'll be heat embossing the Happy Thanksgiving sentiment on the card, and before I do that, I want to get a powder tool and rub that all over the area of the card where I'll be stamping the sentiment. I'm using the EK Success powder tool for this, and powder tools really do help keep excess embossing powder from sticking to your paper or cardstock when you're heat embossing. Next, I'll stamp the sentiment on the bottom right of the card using Versamark ink. I'll stamp it about 1 inch from both the bottom and right edges. Then I'll get a piece of scrap paper and put it under the card, and I'll pour this antique gold embossing powder over the area where I stamped the sentiment. After that, I'll pour off any excess embossing powder onto the scrap paper, and I'll give the back of the paper a tap to remove any bits of excess powder that are left. Then I'll melt the embossing powder using a heat tool. Heating the paper caused it to warp a bit, which isn't a big deal, but I do want to tape these areas down to the surface for the next step. I'm using painter's tape here, but any low-tack tape will work. Next, I'll be stamping the leaves, and to do that, I'll be using Versamark Toffee ink, which is a warm orangey brown. I want this card to have a soft look, which is why I went with a shade of brown instead of black, which I thought would be too bold for the look that I'm going for. I'll start stamping the leaves to create a pattern on the card. There's no real plan here. I'm just trying to get reasonably consistent spacing between the leaves, and I want to try and distribute each of the leaf designs pretty evenly throughout the pattern. I'll also stamp some of the leaves off the edges of the card to give it a more dynamic look. Because I'm using a very absorbent and textured paper, the stamped images won't be quite as crisp as they would be on smoother paper, but that's exactly what I'm going for here. I want a look that's very soft and loose. When I'm finished stamping, you'll see that there are some leaves that didn't stamp perfectly, and that's totally okay. After we're finished painting the leaves, no one will even be able to tell. I'll be using distress inks to paint the leaves, and I picked a bunch of different colors that I thought would work well for fall leaves. The distress ink colors that I'll be using are Ground Espresso, Festive Berries, Tea Dye, Frayed Burlap, Carved Pumpkin, Fossilized Amber, Forest Moss, and Dried Marigold. You can use as many or as few colors as you want for this, and you can go for a brighter color palette and leave out the browns and deeper colors, or you can go for a more muted color palette like I'm doing here. Another great thing is that you can mix custom colors to create a whole new set of colors. Since I'm using so many colors as well as doing some custom color mixing, I'll be using a sheet of palette paper, which will give me plenty of space to work. I'll press all of the ink pads onto the palette paper first, and then I'll experiment with mixing some custom colors. First, I'll mix together some of the Festive Berries and Frayed Burlap, and that will give me a really nice muted shade of red. Then I'll mix the Festive Berries and Tea Dye to make a slightly more orangey red. Mixing Forest Moss and Fossilized Amber makes a great, more muted yellow-green, and Carved Pumpkin plus Ground Espresso gives me a lighter brown with a touch of orange. You can really make an endless number of different colors when you start mixing the inks, and the different shades of brown that I'm using mix with any of the other colors to give them a more muted look, kind of like fall leaf colors later in the season after the really vivid reds and yellows have gone. I'll start painting the leaves, and I'm not using much water for this first layer of painting. I have a paper towel off camera that I'm using to dab off any excess water before I paint each leaf because I want a more light, flat wash of color. I can also paint in any parts of leaves where the ink didn't stamp, so you can see that this soft and loose approach is pretty forgiving, and I can easily cover up any stamping mistakes that I made earlier. After I'm finished painting all of the leaves and the ink is almost dry, I want to come back in and do a second layer of painting to add some texture and depth. Again, I'm not using much water here because I don't want to dilute the ink too much. For some of the leaves, I'll paint the second layer in a similar color to the first layer. For others, I'll completely switch it up and make the second layer a different color. So I'll put something greener over a yellow or a deep brown over a red. You'll notice that there are some areas that bleed out of the stamped leaf area, and I'll go outside the lines here and there too, which gives the card a looser, more organic look. It took me about 45 minutes to paint both layers, so this isn't exactly a quick card project, but it was very relaxing to just take that time to paint and have fun. After I finish painting the second layer and it has a little time to dry, I'll remove the painter's tape from the card, clean up my work area, and then attach the card front to a top-folding horizontal A2 card base using double-sided adhesive. And this card is finished. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more videos like this one, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in again soon.